All right, let's do it. Okay, tonight, welcome everybody to the webinar, Legal Strategies for Savvy Investors. And that is absolutely true. It's a great time to learn how to manage your legal, financial, tax, everything in between, retirement, things like that. Sergey comes to us from Anderson Business Advisors, the great team of our friends we all know and trust really well. We're so excited for the topic tonight. So I'll go ahead and do a quick intro. We always like to mention our 3-day Asset Protection Summit coming up. Those of you who know, oops, let me go back there. Oops, let me go back there. We have a lot of different webinars we do very frequently. Oh boy, I'm having trouble tonight, guys. I'm not sure what's going on. There we go. So these are some of the past webinars we've done. And generally, those are listed then on YouTube. And honestly, guys, there's so much info here. If you have time, we suggest you go there. YouTube, honestly, it's the second largest search engine. Just go to YouTube, search in Protect Wealth Academy, and you'll find the content there. Great topics. Everything from investing, legal, tax. You know, we've even had Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, on the call before. So kind of fun. You're in good company, Sergey. Pretty amazing. So yeah, go to YouTube. And you can select our channel right there. We have a good amount of content. And then our upcoming 3-day Asset Protection Summit. This is our premier event that we do throughout the year. You'll notice Clint Coons there. Everything from asset protection, tax strategies, real estate, and in between, Clint covers very well for us. We love Scott Estel. He's a former senior trial attorney at the IRS. Incredible guy. One of my good friends also there, you'll see off to the left there, Dr. William Danko. He's a co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, one of my favorite books of all time. Love that book. Mike Koval, Options, Futures, and Stocks. Great topic and very timely for right now too. Then Don Pendleton, of course, he's the president of Protect Wealth Academy and my partner. We love that guy. Fantastic event. We really encourage you to come. This is a important time of the year. Our November events are typically one of the most popular, and for good reason, because if you haven't done your tax strategy yet, well, 2023 is right around the corner, and it's your kind of your last chance to get a lot of these things in. If you haven't done your legal structuring, your tax structuring yet, there's no better time than now, and it's better late than never. So a lot of that needs to be done. There are deadlines, end of the year planning, and planning for 2023 kind of sets you up right. So come to that event, November 14th through 16th. Highly recommend that one. If you can't, February 6th through 8th. And these are live streams, so they will be on Zoom. Makes it convenient from your home, your couch, your car even. You know, jump on in. We'd love to have you. And we always do a legal disclaimer before we start an event, of course. No earnings claims, tax, legal, financial advice specific for you will not be given on this webinar. If you're looking for specific tax, legal, or financial advice, well, that's what Anderson Business Advisors are for. You know, contact the team there. Great guys, great team of people. And Sergey Garanyants, make sure I'm saying that right, Sergey. If I'm not saying it right, you jump in.
Here's the easy part, folks. Well, first of all, welcome. Good evening, probably for most of you. It's certainly evening on the Pacific Coast, unless you're maybe in Hawaii, where it's still late afternoon, or somewhere else on maybe Asian side of the planet, where it's already morning coming up. But most of you here in the U.S., in the continental U.S., good evening. My name is Attorney Sergey Garanyants. I'm a senior attorney here at Anderson Business Advisors. A name is a bit of a tongue twister, I know that, which is a good thing that I'm the only person here with that first name in Anderson. So if you call Anderson, you ask for Sergey, there's not a single other person. Out of 400 employees at our company, I'm blessed with that exclusivity as far as the name. And yeah, so you're not going to miss me or confuse me for anyone else.
Okay,
so far,
so we can ask for Sergey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I'm always trying to pronounce it right. So how do you pronounce it perfectly?
Sergey. Yep.
Sergey. And Garanyants, you said?
Yep, that's the tongue twister that we're talking about, which means that for all of you, you can just refer to me by my first name.
Okay.
Drop the last name. Entirely, I didn't pick it, and something that should ask my father where that came from, probably.
Hey, Sergey, it's okay. See, I'm Kendall Blunk, and that's a tongue twister for a lot of people here too. So we're unique. I got your back. It's okay. I love it. That makes us unique and memorable. So I love it. We really appreciate you being on tonight. So you go ahead and take control when you're ready.
Pleasure.
Legal strategies for savvy investors. Sergey comes highly recommended from Anderson, has a lot of experience in this field. And I know, Sergey, this is kind of your specialty. So I'll let you kind of do more of an intro of yourself and go ahead and get started. And then as you like, go ahead and take questions throughout or whatever you feel comfortable with. Maybe leave them to the end, whatever you're comfortable with.
So the questions we're going to have in the Q&A, right? We're not using chat.
That's
awesome.
Correct.
Perfect, folks. Well, good evening again. I'm a senior attorney here at Anderson. I've been practicing law for 7 years now here at Anderson, specifically doing asset protection, estate planning, retirement planning, corporate compliance, and tax planning for the past 4 years here with the company. My previous background comes in the field of real estate and construction law, as well as creditor practices and collection. So I used to be on the other side of that aisle in my prior career before I joined Anderson. And my job was to effectively assist different businesses to mitigate their investment risks and sometimes to go and pursue and collect on some of those outstanding obligations and liabilities. Now I kind of switching sides, if you may, working here by your side, helping you as well as the rest of our clients to stay better protected and better structured for the events and liabilities in case if something goes wrong, because sometimes things are beyond your control, and we always want to make sure that you're in the right place and at the right time when it comes to protecting things you work for so hard all your life. With that being said, the topic of today's discussion, of course, has been previously announced, is the investment using retirement plans. So what we're going to do, let me go ahead and start a screen share. I think, Kendall, you may want to, oh, there you go, I got it, because I'm going to have to take that permission away from you. And let me know if you can see my material. We should be looking at the beautiful slides and presentation.
I like it. Nicely done. I love the color scheme, actually. Nice job.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Let me go ahead and start the slides in the presentation mode.
Yeah, looks good.
So that way you can see it in nice and big. There you
Perfect.
go. Okay,
nice
so
and
we
clean.
got
Thank you.
Right. We got it all. All right. Finally, technology is working. That's the hardest part for the event today. So let's go ahead again. We talked about myself, what I do, sort of why I'm here. A bit of a agenda overview, if you may, for tonight's event. I know we're going to try to keep it short and sweet. I know there's been a request to make sure that we have some time for Q&A, but what we're going to do a little bit, we're going to talk about an overview. I will give you a bit of more of a big picture view of what is an IRA and the most common types of IRAs out there, as well as what is a QRP, otherwise commonly referred to as a solo 401k retirement plan. Then we're going to talk about practical applications of the two, as far as how do you invest, what do you use, how do you structure that investment when you apply your retirement plan, how you fund it, how you contribute money, etc., how you can access the funds. We're also going to talk about a little bit cost maintenance as to what does it take to kind of keep those things going in the long term, as far as general ongoing cost and maintenance. And then we're going to save some time. We'll conclude and open the floor for some Q&A from the audience. As I said, I will be taking a pick here and there into our chat, Q&A, just to see if there's anything interesting for our purpose here that may come up. All right, so let's start with some basic, and the basic is always the definitions, IRAs and QRPs. Let's start with the simple one. IRA, contrary to common misconception, is actually stands for individual retirement arrangement. I know that you rarely hear that phrase, and usually majority of people refer to it as individual retirement account, which is not wrong, by the way, but the official tax code definition for an IRA is an individual retirement arrangement. And what it is basically a tax-deferred investment account that helps you to save for retirement. Simple as that. IRAs can exist in form of special check and savings deposit accounts, as well as some banks or investment institutions may classify them as a special trust accounts because, well, most retirement accounts are considered to be trust arrangements when it comes to holding your pension funds in trust for your benefit. Regulatory, where they come from. The tax advantage and the sort of tax regulatory groundwork for the IRAs comes from federal tax law. It's not ERISA. It's not one of those solo 401k, traditional 401k laws. It's the actual federal tax law. But the IRAs and the individual retirement arrangement themselves are regulated on a state-by-state basis under state law and state statutes, which makes it a bit of a, I would say, gamble in a way, because depending on where you live and depending on where you invest and place where you hold your funds, you might be in one of those states like California, my next door neighbor from here, I'm in Nevada, where IRAs are really not a good sort of protected and structured entities to have, versus other states where they are pretty solid and they allow a good level of both tax advantages and, most importantly, asset protection and liability protection. So that's one thing we're definitely going to have to watch out for. IRA laws and regulations may vary from state to state. Depending on the type of IRA account, generally we can classify them in a tax-deferred bucket and the so-called after-tax bucket. Tax-deferred is vast majority of the IRA's account, which means that when you put money in, you're allowed to write that off from your income, otherwise take tax deduction. The after-tax contribution accounts is usually the most common account of that sort of type, is the Roth IRA. And the key feature of the Roth is that you don't get to write that off, that contribution, when you put money into Roth accounts, but there's an advantage of not being liable for any income when the investment grows, and as well as when you start cashing out at some point down the line when you reach certain retirement age. Again, as mentioned, ERISA, which is a federal law, does not apply to IRAs. IRAs are also mentioned to a limited degree in our bankruptcy legislation, where some protection and the ability of creditors to stick their hand into your IRA might be limited also by certain provisions of the Bankruptcy Code and Bankruptcy Act as well. Well, and the big one, of course, more complicated, I would say, in many ways, is the so-called qualified retirement plan. Now, important distinction. Usually when we talk about qualified retirement plan, in the vast majority of instances, we presume a solo 401ks, at least in a context of self-employed individuals and investors. However, a qualified retirement plan is actually a very broad category. Solo 401ks and traditional 401ks is just one of the few types within that broader category of different plans. And it's well over a dozen of different accounts that meet that qualified retirement plan definition. They sort of apply in different ways. There's different conditions to each one of those plans. Some may work for you, some may not. Some may not even be available for you because there are certain plans that are like pension for government employee, federal employees, and so forth. But generally, qualified retirement plan is a retirement arrangement established by an employer that is designed to provide retirement income to designated employees or beneficiaries. Now, this is a very important distinction, and we're going to talk about it in greater details. For vast majority of qualified retirement plans, there is some sort of a business sponsorship requirement, because when we talk about and compare it to an IRAs, for instance, IRAs can be sponsored by you directly, regardless of what you do, whether or not you own business entities, or whether or not you're fully employed or you're self-employed. So long as you have qualified income, you can sponsor an IRAs. With qualified retirement plans, specifically solo 401ks, there's usually a sponsorship requirement. Now, to be qualified or to meet that qualification, the plan must be set up under the guidelines of the ERISA, which is abbreviation for Employer Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. It's a federal law that effectively regulated and established those various types of retirement accounts, was amended multiple times, pretty much get amended every single time when the tax law is getting changed, but originally trace its origin back to 1974. And so the importance of ERISA here is kind of a twofold. ERISA does not apply to solo 401ks directly, because it's a unique limited type of plan that normally is set up for individual or married couple. But ERISA nevertheless regulate the tax advantages of the benefits of solo 401k. The actual origin and protection of solo 401k trace sort of its legislative origin to bankruptcy legislation. So that's sort of important distinction. Nothing that you need to worry about. Just know that it's federally regulated type of plan. There are no distinctions and variations among the states, unlike with IRAs, meaning that the applicability, the guidelines, the protection, the tax benefit is uniform throughout the nation. And it's different with IRAs, where you can kind of have a little bit of different provisions and different benefits in different states, as well as state where you reside. And as mentioned, these are some of the type of the qualified retirement plans that we've talked about. Simple, don't confuse them with just regular IRA. There's such thing as simple IRA, SEP, IRA, profit sharing plans, solo 401ks, traditional 401ks, Roth 401ks, don't confuse it with a Roth IRA, different types of plans. And then you have those tax deferred benefit, Roth, et cetera. If you're just curious to see what out there, as I mentioned, there's over a dozen of different plans that fall into that bucket. And for our purpose today, we're going to be focused our attention specifically on the solo 401k, as well as the so-called profit sharing component of the solo 401k. That's what we're going to be talking today. Not qualified plans, by the way, something that you see a lot, especially in the investment field, but nevertheless, don't confuse them with the qualified plans. They're not set up and regulated and require the same conditions. And that's your IRAs, traditional IRAs, Roth IRA, self-directed IRAs, which is another one we're going to talk about today a little bit closer. Then you have other things, so-called the 457 plans, 457 as in section 457 of the tax code, if I recall correctly. And then you have things like life insurance policies and so forth. Those are not qualified plans, even though they are oftentimes used as a retirement vehicles. They're just still different. So we have to be careful. All right. Well, what it takes to set up one, right? How do we get started? Where do we get that plan from? And who can help us with it? Let's start with the IRA, since it's a simpler of the bunch, less regulations. So what do you need to set up an IRA? Two things, really. You need an act of a sponsor, and then you need a banking account, basically. Sponsor is you, the client, person, basically the audience. One of you is going to be setting up and creating that plan. And all it's needed is that for you to basically locate a provider, apply for an IRA with them, establish an IRA. Sometimes for certain types of IRA and for certain types of investment, you also need to make sure your IRA has an EIN number, and then you open a bank account through custodian. As mentioned previously, bank account is kind of a broad category. Sometimes they're checking accounts, savings accounts, deposit accounts, and trust accounts. But that's basically, just think of it as a bank account. IRA needs a bank account, and that's for the most part its depiction. There's not going to be a lot of complex paperwork besides perhaps the customer agreement, usually with the custodian. And the IRA takes its shape and form really in a form of bank account. It's that simple. Special type of account, of course, not your like regular checking and saving. Banks will classify them as such. So the IRA structure in that case is basically threefold. You have the account itself, opened with a financial institution, brokerage, or custodian. You have the IRA holder, that's you. Your job is to basically supervise over that investment and make decisions as to what you want to invest in, how do you want to guide your investment. And then usually most IRAs will have a trustee or custodian, basically a representative of the bank that has to bless and approve a particular financial transaction. So if you want to buy real estate, they may ask you to fill out the special form that you will sign off, where you give them an authorization to make that wire transfer, issue check, payment, deposit, etc. So there's usually somebody else assisting you in that process to handle all of that. Well, once you have the IRA, once you establish, how'd you get the money in? Really, relatively simple. I'll say one of the two ways. There's nothing else. First, well, let's start with contribution. Simple traditional way is that you're allowed to contribute money from an earned income. Important distinction here, especially for investors like yourselves or prospective investors. And that will apply, by the way, the same way to QRPs and solo 401ks. Not every type of income is qualified to be dumped, so to speak, onto your IRA. What I mean by that is that generally your retirement accounts has to be funded with your what's called earned income. And earned income is essentially, think of it in a simplistic way, an active income. That is your wages, that is your salary, that is commission, tips, bonuses, or certain net income from self-employment if you're self-employed, sole proprietor, etc. So in other words, passive portfolio investment income usually directly do not qualify to be the type of income that can be deferred or deposited into a retirement account. And that rule, as I said, as I mentioned, applies to both IRAs and the solo 401ks as well. So it has to be basically that unique form, unique type of income. And the second way to fund your IRAs is through the rollover. And that is usually a convenient way to consolidate some of your retirement funds if you already previously had an IRA that you, maybe a couple of them, maybe even a 401k, and you just simply looking to combine the assets together, combine the funds, because maybe by themselves, each individual retirement account lacks the necessary amount for the investment you're trying to make. So rollover is that hefty trick where you can sort of pool all of those funds from different retirement accounts together. And by the way, rollovers can be for the IRA, can come from IRAs and most QRPs. You cannot roll over funds out of Roth, sort of a unique animal, but for the most part, if it's a tax deferred plan, you can pull it in the IRA. So then if you need to gather enough funds there to make the acquisitions, you can do so as well. And that's how you get in started. Well, similar kind of a setup or similar logic. Let's talk about how to set up a qualified retirement plan or solo 401k. And as I promised, those are a little bit more complex because qualified retirement plans generally must be employer-sponsored retirement accounts, which by definition requires some sort of business. Obviously, LLC corporation can also be a sole proprietorship, even certain types of trust, depending on their investments and nature of the income they generate. They can sponsor retirement accounts, but your sponsor in this case is not going to be person like yourself, like we've had it in the IRA example. It will have to come from a business. And usually I'm a big proponent of having a business organization of some sort. We're talking about your corporations or LLCs. Stay away from transactions with or QRP sponsorship in the name of the sole proprietorship. Even though those are permitted, there's a lot of sort of a wishy-washy blur lines where sometimes it's difficult to distinguish or separate your personal income from your business activity. So normally we're talking about a sponsoring business of some sort, an incorporated entity, usually most commonly LLC or corporation. You will require papers, by the way. Remember with IRA, I mentioned that usually the only papers you sign there is a customer agreement or service agreement with the bank. Well, for QRP or solo 401k, you're going to need about 100 sort of plus page long trust agreement. QRP has, just like your LLCs or corporation, must have a governing document that outline its terms, your discretion, and basically scope of permissible powers and investment powers in your name, because your plan can be very narrow, strictly construed, limited to retirement contributions, allowing virtually no meaningful investment powers. That's kind of like standard QRPs if you're just going to go out there on the market and try to buy one, purchase one. Or when you work with services like Anderson, who can create a customized plan for your needs, you can really draft your plan in more broader scope and broader sense, where you will allow a lot of different types of investment. Just as a basic example, since we're talking about real estate quite often and mentioning that, most standard solo 401ks out there on the market would not allow you to invest in real estate. Sort of as sad as it might be, while when you work with a more customized service that can create a proper plan for you, that's the type of powers we'll always make sure that we include there, because, well, a lot of people wanted to invest. So then once you have a sponsoring entity, once you have all the necessary paperwork to create the plan, your trust agreement for that solo 401k, Last but not least, you're going to need to have a bank account. And that's your basically investment banks out there where you can host, if you may, your accounts where the funds are going to be held, where deposits are going to be made. And you can have names like Charles Schwab, Fidelity, most regular banking institutions, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, et cetera, have a retirement account division where the accounts can be open. If you go and work with Anderson, then I just wanted to kind of highlight specifically that we specifically set up our accounts through Charles Schwab. Even though there's a lot of options out there, we work with them directly for one simple reason. As a vendor for retirement plan, we are able to offer plans and certain products that are normally not necessarily accessible by general public if you just simply show up at a local Charles Schwab office and try to open a solo 401k with it. There's multiple accounts that we create. We'll touch on that kind of further, so you have all of those things you're trying to do as far as contributions, investments, loan, borrowing, and so forth. So we work with Charles Schwab just as a matter of example. Well, and the same thing, kind of a following up on the setup structure conversation, your QRP structure, so 401k structure, rather differs than an IRA. You also have those three types of players or participants in the plan, but they are different and they perform very important, I would say, material, crucial role, and it's widely different than your IRAs. For example, you have a plan administrator. That's the business, essentially. That's your company, your corporation, S or C corps in the most cases, or LLCs, taxed as such, that's gonna basically administer this plan for the benefit of employees, and that's you, could also be you and a spouse, so the two of you. You have manager or officer if it's a corporation, or manager if it's an LLC, who's going to act as a representative of that sponsoring business and may have to sign certain documents having to do with banking transactions and or tax reporting. And then last but not least, you have a trustee, and that's an appointed fiduciary. Normally you as well, as except it's kind of a one thing that I want you to understand, you involved in the business, you're going to be involved with your plan. So in a different capacity, you're going to be wearing all those different hats, because sometimes you have to act in the capacity of a manager. Sometimes you're going to have to act in the capacity of trustee of your retirement plan, because retirement plans don't have managers. They call them trustees because, remember, it's a trust arrangement. So the manager of the trust is normally known as trustee. Well, and the same two ways to fund the retirement account, the solo 401k, just like with IRA, you can contribute from an earned income, except there's slightly different rules. I'm going to get into details. Contributions from an income, if you have since you have a sponsoring business, will get tied into your compensation you receive from your business, aka the salary from that business. And just like IRA, you can do a rollover into that solo 401k. You can take money from your old 401k, like you're with a prior employer perhaps. You can bring money from IRAs if you have IRA, and you can also combine it within your solo 401k bucket, just like we've done with the IRAs. Kind of a similar discussion there. All right, so before we go into some of the details QRP, let's take a look at some of our questions. So the question is, Preeti's asking, good question. Is this applicable to W-2 employees? Yes, it is, meaning that you can be a W-2 full-time employee with a 401k, traditional 401k sponsored by your employer, and still maintain a solo 401k. It's a very common question to ask, meaning that I'm having a regular job with Anderson. I'm a W-2 employee here. Can I have a solo 401k? The answer is yes. The only limitation there for those of you W-2 employees with existing plans that are sponsored by your employers, two limitations. Your overall contribution, annual contribution limit into your 401k is a limit that applies across all of your 401ks, which basically means that if you somehow already maxed out that compensation allowed per year with your employer that pays you salary, you pretty much will be able to make no compensation contributions out of your own business, even though you have a solo 401k in there. So that's one distinction. And the second distinction usually come up in the case that, well, I have a traditional 401k with my employer and I want to roll over the funds. Can I do that? The answer is maybe. It will be defined by the terms of your employer's plan. because most employers, unfortunately, will not allow you to roll the money out of your traditional 401k that they sponsor unless and until you either retire or you change career, quit that job, being laid off, terminated, whatever the case. In other words, you're no longer employed with them. So then now you can take your benefits with you. So if you still continue to work, likely there'll be a limitation on your ability to basically access those funds, put them in your solo 401k. So then now you have more investment flexibility because your employer will not allow your real estate purchases in that plan. Elizabeth asked you another good question. I have a living trust. Is that considered a qualified sponsor? Elizabeth, no. A traditional living trust are estate planning entities. They are there to provide guidance and tax planning strategies in the event of your death or incapacity, but they're not considered business entities sufficient enough to sponsor retirement accounts. So for someone like yourself, we may have to look into what is that you do, what's your nature of income or the type of investment you partake, to see if we can put that activity under a business entity umbrella and then have a plan sponsored with that entity. The good news, though, if you have a living trust, it's an important part of your overall planning process here, because you definitely need to make sure that your living trust owns your retirement plan, that in the event of your death, if there's any unused assets and resources inside of that plan, then we will go ahead and be able to sort of will them to some of our family members, so that way it doesn't pass away. But most living trusts, vast majority of living trusts, are not qualifying type of arrangements to sponsor a solo 401k. You need a business, in other words. All right, so the 401k, what as the title of the previous slide suggests, the profit sharing explained. And what it is, it's because solo 401k is a lot more complex plans as far as how they're funded, how they can generate the income. There's some limitations, there's some freedom, so they're kind of a pros and cons as compared to the IRAs. One thing I wanted to break down and focus on specifically, let's say you have a function business, you have a 401k linked to it. So how do you funnel the money into it, and how do you can fund? Well, so contributions are made basically into your solo 401k can be made through two channels when we're talking about earned income. Part of it can come out, it should come out of your paycheck. In other words, you likely will going to have to receive a W-2 salary. There's some exceptions for certain sole proprietorship with self-employment income, but in most cases, CRS Corps will have to cut you a payroll check. And then there is an employer match, which basically the retirement planning QRP rules allow us, your business rather, to take the amount that you've previously contributed to your plan out of your own paycheck and match that, maximizing that plan's balance. This is a very important feature because as we kind of will see in this following slide, for the 2023, this upcoming year, I decided to provide you with the most updated information since we're already in November. Your overall contribution limit to a solo 401k can go as high as $66,000. If you are in the age of 52 and older, there's an additional catch-up contribution. If I remember correctly, for 23, it's going to be another $7,000 that you can put on top. Those numbers are huge because normally in any sort of a normal contribution ways, you are nowhere near as high in your IRA as you can get inside of your solo 401k. And that is because the IRA, the solo 401k has the employee contribution channel and then employer match, where basically your company can kind of see how much you've contributed to your plan and can maximize that investment. So there's special rules and formulas applied. We're not going to get in technicality. Just know one thing: if you have enough income into that business. So basically, just if you want a ballpark number, what's enough income? If you pull a salary out of your business of roughly, I would say $130,000, $140,000, you can get $66,000 into your solo 401k for use for your retirement, certain tax deferment benefit, as well as subsequent investment in real estate, stock, and other things. That's huge because the only way usually to get that kind of money into an IRA is to either roll over from existing plans, or there's another special strategy exists for Roth IRAs that's called basically Roth conversion, backdoor conversion. Sometimes it's referred to as a mega Roth, all those huge kind of awards. But all of them usually presume for you to put money in some sort of tax deferment account, oftentimes solo 401k actually, and then you can convert it and put it into a Roth, kind of take advantage out of tax-free growth from Roth account as well. But so that one is huge, and that's why I want to focus kind of a specific slide on the fact that with solo 401ks, you have what's called a profit sharing element where your business can match your benefit and the amount of money you dump into your own retirement account. Well, now that we know how the plans are set up, now that we know that we get funded with a lot of money in all those different ways, whether it's salary, wages, or rollovers, etc., we also wanted to address things having to do with prohibited transactions, because prohibited transactions, pretty broad topic. You probably heard of it, and that's something I wanted to for us to mention from the start, from the get-go, to kind of understand what that is and what that isn't. Because of all those tax benefits, because of the advantages that essentially all retirement plans have to a certain extent, whether it's tax deferment, whether it is a growth of the income on a tax-free basis, like with the Roth accounts, there are some limitations because, you have this amazing investment vehicle and retirement vehicle that allow you to save on taxes or take certain benefits. So what the IRS then does, it's kind of limit the playing field a little bit, because in order to avoid unfair competition of your retirement investment vehicles with the traditional for-profit entities that are always subject to taxations, there are a couple of restrictions and limitations. And those limitations are normally outlined or documented in a form of prohibited transaction rule that essentially do not, prohibited transaction never address the type of investment you can invest in. What they talk about is with whom your plan cannot transact business. In other words, who are the people or organizations that your plan cannot touch or come close because of some limitations. And usually, just to give you some example of prohibited individuals, account holders, providers, employers, sponsoring businesses, just know that whenever you're trying to partner with your solo 401k, whenever you're trying to make a loan to or investment with the family members, you always should speak to a professional to assess any potential prohibited transaction, because the good news with solo 401k in particular, you don't have as much flexibility with IRAs, but with solo 401ks in particular, you actually have a lot of flexibility of being able to avoid some of those limitations by simply structuring your transaction in a proper fashion. IRAs are a lot more limited than solo 401ks and a lot more stringent when it comes to prohibited transaction. But usually, in my experience, what I've seen, there's always a solution. It's just sometimes more creative way, like creating certain specialized partnerships or using the proper type of paperwork, like the solo 401k loans and things like that, to make sure that you haven't done anything that can be, a slap on the wrist, because a reprimand or for violating this prohibited transaction rule can be rather harsh depending on the situations. It can be taxes and penalties, where they're usually start at 10% penalty, income tax liability, and or can go as far as disqualifying transaction or disqualifying the plan in its entirety. Just so you understand, when your plan is becoming disqualified, that means that basically all the money, every single penny in that plan, everything that was earned in that plan will be treated as an income to you, and the penalty will get assessed on that. So it can get pretty ugly, which means that, once you start kind of investing, just keep that in mind. That's one topic that I encourage everyone to research a little bit more, and or consult a professional, of course, at your service shortly after to, kind of assess to make sure that you are okay here. Now, Kendall, I know I have you here. Do we have any announcements in the meantime or not? Because this is our sort of kind of a hot point in the presentation today. And anything
we're
to
okay
brought
right
up?
now. The only thing I will say, if you're okay with it, Sergey, I think a lot on the call have already expressed interest in having a consultation with someone at Anderson. Like you just mentioned, there's a lot of them
Yep.
who want to have a consultation. So if you're okay with it, I'm going to put a link in the chat screen. You can actually click on that link, guys.
Absolutely. Let's do this. I'm gonna go grab another glass of water.
Okay.
Give me 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pause, the presentation here, put all the relevant information for the folks so everyone can copy and paste that link.
Great.
In the meantime, we will do that again at the end of the webinar, but I know if in case of some of you are not staying with us till the end, I think it's a good good place and time to so please refer to the chat. That's where you're going to find the helpful link on how you get started. And I will be.
Take your time. No problem. So a lot of you on the call, what we try to do is we do provide that free consultation. Anderson doesn't always do that. They have a lot of advisors, attorneys that they, are available to take your call and kind of schedule with on that link. And the reason we do that here at Protect Wealth is because they are very much in line with how we teach asset protection and tax strategies. Like I said at the beginning of the call, we go back about 20 years plus with Anderson advisors, Clint Coons, Toby, Michael, and the team. Great group of people. And basically, we want to make sure that you have, the access to good resources, that can help you get things done right. And we feel like Anderson really does a good job at that. It really comes down to, we found over the years, and this is true, we found over the years that if you have your entities set up right, and that includes your retirement QRPs, even your corporations, LLCs, everything done properly, over time, you're going to be so much further ahead than you would have had you not set things up properly with the right tax, legal structuring, and especially solo 401k QRP type strategies. Absolutely. My 14-year-old daughter and I were talking about the eighth wonder of the world today, which is compound interest. If you're doing it right, it's very, very important that you get it done early and often, right? That's what we always say. Do your strategies and structuring early and often, because you'll be so much further ahead than just the average Joe who does not do it. And that's true. Even look at The Millionaire Next Door. If you remember, a lot of you may have read that book. What's the one thing that millionaires did different than the average in that book, according to their studies? And they studied millionaires. One of the major contributing factors was they spent an inordinate amount of time figuring out how to reduce their taxes. That's exactly what Sergey is teaching you here. So beautiful. It's a great strategy, Sergey. I think we're good. You back there?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you very much for this quick pit stop. You folks got to understand, I live in a dry climate, and like 70% of the year we have heat and the AC running. So when you're done, stop talking, all day, you kind of you want to make sure stay hydrated.
I drink a lot of water this weekend.
Yes, you got to drink a lot of water.
You
got to drink a lot of water. It can come more handy for someone like us living in the desert. But anyways, let's, before we go ahead on with our next topic, our next section of presentation, there's a couple of questions that came in that I think are very interesting that we can touch on. So a couple of questions. Candy is asking, when if you have a 501c3 and own income producing property? So Candy, 501c3s, otherwise known as nonprofits, of course, can be sponsors of retirement account. The difficulty with nonprofits, though, that you have to kind of take into account that tax exempt, tax deferred nature, where the amount of payroll and the benefits that you receive as an employee has to be counterbalanced against the charitable contributions that your nonprofit should be doing. Because remember, the main point of a nonprofit is not to keep you employed and to fund your retirement plan, is to benefit the public by creating some sort of benefit in a particular field. So nonprofits can sponsor retirement accounts, but there are some conditions, usually having to do with a strategy planning, meaning that, is that a right fit for you? Or maybe, in order to not to attract unwanted attention from the IRS to your nonprofit, perhaps we should focus on something else as a sponsoring business for your QRP rather than give it to your nonprofit. But as a general rule, nonprofit can, because nonprofits for that purpose actually treat it more of as a C corporation when it comes to sponsoring retirement accounts. So that's just something to know. Lori has an interesting question. I'm 61 years old, spouse is 81. Can my real estate management company, an LCS corporation, create a self-directed Roth 401k for me without my spouse, since he would have not taken RMDs, or can he be included? So yes, unfortunate sort of news, if you may, for some of the married couples. Usually, if you're a married individual and you've created a qualified retirement plan, it will require for you to also include your spouse in it. Now, the spouse doesn't have to contribute and doesn't have to benefit. But generally speaking, when it comes to required RMDs, it depends on who contributed, because usually with like Anderson QRPs, if you're a married couple, you have the sub accounts for each spouse. And it is possible for you to, let's say, be a married couple. Let's say me and my spouse, my wife were married. She's not contributing to our plan because she has a traditional plan provided by employer, but I want to contribute to our solo 401k. So I can put money into my bucket that are then subject to my age restrictions, as well as my required minimum distribution rules based on my age. It's possible to do. My only challenge here, Lori, in your question, it's two of you, right? One is 61, the other one is 81. Well, 61, because you only have a few more years, so to speak, left. You can set up accounts. You can even do a catch-up contributions. You can fund them with a little extra money than most of us under the age of 55. But it's also going to have a limited lifespan, in the sense that you will hit that 72 eventually, and RMDs will kick in for you. So the enjoyment of the retirement account might not necessarily be as long for someone, obviously, of a younger age. But to answer your question, you can get it done. You can have sub accounts inside of your QRP, and if it's like just for you because you're, let's say, younger, and you have a longer lifespan till you have to start withdrawing that money, you can contribute to your own bucket, your own portion of that solo 401k, and your spouse can have that option but not contribute as well, especially when it does not necessarily make sense based on age. But anyhow, let's move on with the investment to QRP, and we'll resume. I know there's a lot of interesting questions out there, which is, the point of free session, strategy session that was highlighted by Kendall a moment ago, because a lot of you have unique circumstances, age, investment type of activities, the desired form of business and line of work you want to get into. So that's the purpose of those sessions, to give you an opportunity to come up with a personalized plan based on what works for you, because we talk a lot about general rules in this event, but it's not a cookie cutter, right? And it's certainly not a one size fit all. It may work for some, may not work for others. But let's talk about what are the types of investments you can do with your solo 401ks, and by the way, IRAs for the most part, in that sort of for that purpose. So the first most common that most of you probably heard is the so-called market investment. And what it is basically the stock market we're talking about. It also may apply with some limitations to cryptocurrency these days as well. So you can invest in any traditional type of stock, stock, bonds, mutual funds, EFTs, real estate syndication deals through stock market, and similar things. You are also allowed the so-called options trading, but be careful. So for those of you option and margin traders, if it's only limited to option level 1, the so-called covered calls and cash secured puts. I'm not going to be going in a lot of weeds on that, because there are some sort of technicalities with those. But for those of you who are wondering, can I do options trading using my solo 401k? The answer is yes, except there's only one very limited sort of base level of option trading, and option level 1 is what permissible. We do have Infinity Investing Program that, for those of you who are interested in more of a stock trading and you want to learn a little bit more, there's some specialized courses that you can also take and work on the structure with Anderson as well. Second, obviously, most common form of investment that are probably becoming more and more known this day and age is investment in real estate. You can use your IRAs, you can use your solo 401ks to invest in real estate. An example, for instance, can be buying a piece of property, investing in syndication deal, buying the property outright. There are a few conditions, though, and they also, by the way, apply with other forms of investment. Keep in mind that whenever you invest using your retirement plans, whether it's an IRA or a solo 401k, doesn't matter. It is an investment when you buy something inside of that plan directly. It is an investment that belongs to the plan, which means that you cannot benefit from it directly, not just yet, at least. Meaning that whenever you flip a property or you, let's say, lease the property out, or you run an Airbnb and you collect rental income, that income must be returned and deposited back into your retirement account. You cannot pay yourself management fees. You cannot compensate yourself sort of for your services performed, because all of those will be a classic example of prohibited transactions. You are allowed to guide the investment of the plan. You are allowed to, of course, ratify documents, sign purchase agreements, offer letters, make deposits, check statements and things like that. But the financial benefit of that investment, we're always going to belong to the plan. And it's important because that's where people can oftentimes commit the so-called prohibited transaction, is that they receive the rent, deposit, and then they put it in their own account, in their own checking, wrongfully or mistakenly assuming that they can have access to those funds without going through some of the formalities of the withdrawal using retirement accounts. And basically, formalities are that you can access income generated by your QRP, except until only when you reach a certain age. And normally, you can start taking out distributions at 59 years old. They will be subject to income taxes, because remember, solo 401k is tax deferred. So you can have access to those funds. You can benefit from them, provided that you may need to pay an income tax on that income received, which basically means that if you're not sure, if you're not of a certain age, or if you're too young, don't touch it, because you might be triggering either a tax and penalty, or you might be committing, again, prohibited transaction. You have to be very structured in the way how you invest using your retirement funds. And when in doubt, of course, reach out to your advisor, reach out to your attorney, reach out to your investment group, ask, because as I said, the good news is that there likely is a workaround that we can come up with for you. We just want to make sure it's done right and it's done properly. Loans is a unique feature of the qualified retirement plan, specifically solo 401ks for our purpose. There are no such thing as an IRA loan if you're looking to borrow money personally. Your IRA can lend funds to the third party. Let's say somebody's looking to buy property and they want to use a gap funding or bridge loan of some sort. Your IRA can act as a lender in that point. But the unique advantage and pretty cool feature of the solo 401k specifically is that you yourself, as an individual, actually, as well as members of your family, as well as your businesses that you own that are sort of separate from the sponsoring business, can borrow money from your solo 401k. There are conditions, of course, like everything with the retirement plans, there are conditions, but it is a permissible. So general first condition is how much can you borrow? There is a limit on the amount of money you can borrow from your solo 401k. And the limit is in the form is that your single loan out of your retirement account cannot exceed $50,000 or 50% of your plan account balance, whichever is less. Again, important, $50,000 or 50% of your balance, whichever is less, which basically means that your loan, your single loan out of the solo 401k would never exceed $50,000 at once, assuming that you have 100,000 or more in that account. If you have less than 100,000, then it's a 50% formula will apply. And let's say you have an $80,000 sitting in there, you slash that in half, then your maximum loan with that account balance cannot exceed $40,000. It is permissible, however, that the way we structure our plans, that there provided that you have enough money again, and provided that you comply with that 50-50, so to speak, type of rule, 50,000 or 50%. It is permissible to have multiple loans outstanding out of that account at once. In most cases, the way we structure our plans, we do not allow more than 3 outstanding loans at any given point in time. And then also an important point about 401k loans, if you borrow them, they cannot go, in most cases, it's either 3 or 5 years. Why am I saying 3 or 5 years? Traditional rule used to be 3 years. In light of the 2020 events and COVID and CARES Act, the IRS, well, Senate, specific Congress, expanded the ability to take out loan for various economic hardship for a longer time, which is now we have the ability to have solo 401ks loan for as long as 5 years in some cases, sort of hardship loans or just general loans for no particular hardship reason. But just keep in mind that it can revert and likely will revert back once the sort of pandemic sometimes eventually will be over, because the old rule used to be a loan cannot exceed through 3 years sort of span in time. Okay, well, we're going to take some questions from the audience, as I promised, but we're going to keep it short and sweet. I want to touch on few things, and then I want to make a brief mentioning on the structures, on how do you do that and how do you invest whenever you have a retirement account involved. Kendall, I know we are kind of coming up on an hour soon. Are we okay with a few more minutes?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, great. Yeah, folks, sorry, it's, again, a lot of material, probably some of it will have to be reviewed by you again. But first things first, some of the side rules that are kind of one of those pesky little things that come up that people don't always remember. There was a few questions about, can I do it with me and my wife, or spouse, etc. The answer is yes to that. But important condition, in order for you to have a solo 401k, you need to make sure that your business does not have any employees. In other words, that family small held business essentially has to be run only by you and your spouse. You cannot have any other people, and that may include children as your employees. By the way, there are some limitations to that, because the law on retirement account require you to then offer and convert that solo 401k with the broad flexibility into narrowly construed and structured traditional 401k, just like the one that your employer currently offer you, that will allow virtually no meaningful investment opportunity, because unfortunately employers cannot discriminate among their employees in benefits. And one such benefit is offering retirement plans and savings, which basically means if you have a business where you also hire employees, solo 401k is not for you. And by the way, another weird application of that rule, it's not just necessarily the business that sponsors this retirement account. It's any business that you or your spouse may own, because obviously people sometimes run multiple businesses at the time. That rule and that limitation will apply for all of your businesses. If you have employees, can't have solo 401k. You can, by the way, have contractors inside of your business, because those are not considered employees. But if you hire employees to whom you pay salary, forget about solo 401k. The only route there is an IRA or, frankly, traditional 401k. There is a cost associated with plans. Mostly, I would say, solo 401ks. IRAs are certainly considerably cheaper out of the two, because it's usually less maintenance, less compliance. You can't put as much money, but there's also less cost involved and less formalities. But with the 401k, you have, first of all, you have, set up fees. If you have to hire someone to help you and assist in that, create a business, create the plan. Then in some instances, your plan may need to file tax return. Usually if you hold over $500,000 in assets in your plan or in certain transactions, you anticipate some return, your plan may have to file separate tax returns. So that's another sort of added cost. On the business side of things, you have annual renewals, you have registered agent fees, tax return for the business itself. So also remember that might be kind of an expense you have to factor in your operations. It's not sort of one and done. There's usually some form of compliance. And then every 5 years, you're going to have to restate your retirement plan, your solo 401k in its entirety, because that's basically the periodic frequency of when the tax law on the retirement plans changes. And that's the requirement for you to start incorporating some of that some of those changes and amendments to make sure you have the most current LLC agreement. Again, remember options, limitations, loan limitations, and similar things. Why do you want to use Anderson specifically for a QRP? Well, as I've mentioned, there's kind of a lot of different ways, kind of a million different ways, frankly, how you can structure your retirement plans. But the one plan you wanted to have is the one that gives you the most broad investment ability, that allows you to control the funds, that allow you to keep everything in-house, and allow you to do things that your traditional employer-sponsored plans will not allow you to do. This also, by the way, important because solo 401ks have a better rule against the prohibited transaction workarounds and things like unrelated debt financed income or unrelated business income taxes, which are some of the penalties that may apply if you've done something wrong or you invested something wrong with your plan. 401ks are more flexible in that avoidance process as compared to your IRAs, which is also kind of one way why you often may want to have a solo 401k over an IRA. Yes, it costs more. As we've mentioned, there is some ongoing expenses. These are just some of you to consider as setup costs, administrative fees, potential tax returns, loan. Some custodians may charge you for loan transaction paperwork. And then if you choose to terminate, there's a proper way how you have to liquidate and get rid of the plan. But the financial benefit is certainly unmatched by anything else on the market currently. All right. Well, with that being said, we've arrived at a conclusion. So let's take a couple of questions from the audience. So, Kendall, anything you want me to focus on specifically? Any questions? Anything interested before we jump into our?
No, I think you did great. I really will just reinforce a lot of you. We get a lot of calls, a lot of questions too, frequently about solo 401ks, retirement plans. So, guys, I put that chat in that link in the chat screen again, so it is clickable. Please go ahead and do that. So Sergey, when someone does a consultation with you or someone from Anderson, what's usually the process? Oh, we lost you on mute, I think.
You're right. I was muted. Just trying to avoid some of the background noises and things like that. It's been rainy out today in Las Vegas. But anyhow, yeah. So it's a couple of things. Usually, if you're an existing client, then you probably know how to go about reach out to your business advisor. If you're new, then what you get is a free strategy session. And by the way, those strategy sessions are not just limited to the topic covered today, like your retirement plan use. If this is your particular focus, then you can certainly make that consultation about that. But your free strategy session will look at everything you do in life. If you're married, spouse, and we start with investments, forms of income, businesses, tax mitigation strategies, how you can use some of those tools to aid yourself, not only in being able to invest in things, but how you can benefit from it from a tax standpoint, because there's usually a lot of savings you can unlock using business entities, using retirement plans. And last but not least, we even touched on the topics having to do with your succession planning and your life and death situation. And that's your living trust, that's wills, that's power of attorneys, some other things that even after you created all of this, or if you already have certain things, how do you make sure that it's passed on to the next generation in the most sort of good or successful fashion. So that's the free strategy session. After that, you will receive what's called a wealth plan and blueprint, where we give you a visual diagram of all those different entities and various paths that we propose to you to have. Then you can decide. And obviously, during that call, if there's any questions about the cost, now, as well as any maintenance, that's also something that will be getting addressed. But you get that call initial consultation and wealth plan and blueprint at no cost. You can take a look to see what we can offer for you, and then you can decide. That's normally.
Awesome. Thank you. I will say we have a lot of people call in that have done the consults with you or your team, and they call in and tell us, they let us know that they felt a major sense of relief that it was all done, all mapped out. They had a plan in place, knew how to move forward. It's kind of fun. So we really appreciate that. Thank you for offering that tonight, Sergey.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, so there's a couple of questions on the presentation, sort of separate scenarios. I want to do one quick touch on a few things that we didn't really have covered in details in on the slides and presentation, just because, there's a lot of sort of different ways how you can actually structure the deal. But one important thing that I want you to know, and you see it on our partners, Mr. Clint Kunz, who's also done a lot of those events on his YouTube channel. He kind of talks a lot about structure. So one thing I want you to understand, specifically, I would say apply more so to real estate, to a lesser degree to other form of investments like market and so forth. But if you're looking to buy and acquire real estate using your IRA or solo 401k, please keep in mind that retirement plans, they're distinct legal persons and then distinct taxpayers oftentimes, but they're distinct legal persons, which means that they can transact, acquire assets and transact and do business directly as a retirement plan. This is exactly how you sign purchasing paperwork. This is exactly how you can have a deed to the property issued where it's going to say, ABC Inc., solo 401k, Sergey the trustee, FBO, like for the benefit of, let's say, like the title can be written in the name of the plan. But these are some of the worst strategies if you acquire in real estate. And what I'm talking about specifically, there is such thing that we can obviously, we can address that in your particular blueprint if that's something that should apply to you, where you form what's called a QRP LLC or IRA LLC. What these are unique form of limited liability companies, LLCs. They're 100% owned and funded by your retirement plan. Don't confuse that one with the sponsoring business, like your corporation that generate incomes that then contribute to your plan. These are entities that are formed specifically under your plan's umbrella for the acquisition of specific assets, most notably real estate. And the main advantage there, why you wanted to have that business entity, why you just don't want to have a deed or title to the real estate issued directly in the name of the plan. First and foremost, remember of the landlord and tenant liability. If tomorrow something happens on that premises and somebody gets injured, or there's some sort of unlawful eviction process that took place, things along that line, and you have a disgruntled tenant that's trying to sue the landlord, well, if the title is held directly by your IRA or your solo 401k, they are acting as a landlord, which basically means that you'll give them ability to have a direct legal claim against the retirement account. And if there are other investments and other funds held in that inside of that account, that's where you can get an exposure. So the way you limit yourselves from that exposure is that you form an IRA LLC or QRP LLC. It's an LLC that 100% owned and disregarded for tax purposes, owned by your retirement plan, whether it's an IRA, self-directed IRA, Roth IRA, or your solo 401k. The plan, then retirement plan, funds the entity with those money, with the funds, and then the entity makes the purchase. So then when the title is issued to that real estate, it is issued in the name of that LLC. Your plan act as the owner LLC. So when the liability, if liability happens, that a liability, let's say a tenant liability, will apply to that LLC, and your plan is gonna be hidden behind the limited liability shield of that LLC, which means that your tenant will not be able to bring a legal claim and action against the plan directly, especially if you have a rather diversified portfolio inside of the plan. Maybe there's some stock, maybe there's some money, and few rental properties or investment properties that are sitting there. Maybe there's syndication deals and things like that. So it's an important note. Try to avoid taking title to those types of risky assets directly in the name of the plan. Always use an LLC as a buffer. And another advantage to use an LLC, that if it eventually one day you decide to do things like rollover, and maybe you decide to move money from your solo 401k into an IRA because you're trying to do a backdoor Roth conversion, things like that, it's also make it easier to roll over that real estate from one plan to another, because you're not going to have to deal with the change of title. Remember, the property will still get titled in the name of that LLC that is owned by the plan. What plan can then do is assign the ownership, in other words, ownership interest of that LLC to your other plan, or in lieu of your required minimum distributions when you get old enough, you can take the title and possession to that real estate eventually yourself directly in lieu of distribution. So which is why it's kind of important, plans, when we talk about all that investment, specifically with real estate, at least, make sure you always use an LLC as a buffer because there's a liability limitation. You don't want your plan to be exposed to more than it should. Usually, if you just invest in stock, these are relatively low risk investments. They can have a financial risk, but relatively low legal risk, which basically means that your brokerage service is likely not going to sue your retirement plan for buying or selling certain stock. So in those instances, it's okay to have these types of investment accounts like stock, EFTs, bonds, etc., crypto, to be held by your plan directly. But when it comes to real estate, just important note, remember that there has to be an LLC buffer. You never want a real estate to be titled in the name of your plan directly. You want to form an entity funded with retirement money, make that entity owned by your plan, and then take title in the name of that LLC. So that's an important distinction because a lot of people don't realize that LLC can be used in connections with the plan and specifically real estate assets. Alrighty, well, so we do have quite a few questions. Let's go back maybe to our beginning. We did answer some of those. Elizabeth asking, is a LLC with a real estate holding considered a qualifying sponsor? Elizabeth, good question. Not if you're doing a long-term passive real estate, because remember, initial qualification for being able to contribute to your IRA or your 401k is that it has to be active income. If you have a passive holding entity that generating passive long-term rental income, that is a portfolio income, that's a dividend, that is not qualifying form of income for this form of investment. Which means that if you do Airbnbs, by the way, that's an active income. And those types of real estate holding companies may qualify provided that they do have an active income. Abraham is asking, what is the ROBS tax code? Is it the same as a solo 401k? To an extent, but not quite the same. So I don't have a specific statutory reference. For those of you who don't know, ROBS stands for rollover business startup, and it's a whole different breed sort of type of animal where if you have a retirement account, you have an ability to fund a startup business using those retirement funds that will normally require you to form a brand new corporation under the plan's umbrella, and you roll over existing funds into the operating account of the corporation. So Abraham, if you'd like, you can call us in and we can chat about it separate, but ROBS is a kind of a whole unique animal. It's just another creative way how you can use a solo 401k. It's not the same statutory reference. No, it's a it's a different statutory reference under tax code that talks about rollover business startups and how these are exempt from normal, prohibited transaction type of rules, so long as you meet the specific criteria for the rollover business startup. G's asking, in connection with the people who have currently W-2 income, a W-2 employee needs to have a self-employed income as well, don't they? Yes, correct. So basically, the previous question that was asked by Pretty, meaning that can an existing W-2 employee can also have a sole 401k. So remember, you're going to have a business, like you have a regular daytime job, right? And then you're going to have some sort of self-employed business that generated active income, maybe a side gig job that you do on the side. You will need to have also issue or receive a salary inside of that business too, because that way, and that's how your business, self-employed business, can continue contributing to your solo 401k, even though you're already contributing to your employer-sponsored solo 401k. Just remember that's $66,000. If I remember for 2023, that's the ceiling among all of your 401ks, which basically means that the amount of money you put into your employer-sponsored plan would need to be taken into consideration to figure out how much you have left to max out on your solo 401k as well, because the two are 401ks for that purpose, and the limit will apply across all of the plans. The good news is that the limit is per person. So if it's you and a spouse, you can double that essentially collectively because it's an individual benefit. So you can max out your contribution so long as your spouse is also involved in the business and receives a salary. She can do the same thing, and she can put that same basically amount into her bucket, so both of you can double. It's a limit among all of your plans, but it's not limit between the spouses. Each person gets a ceiling, so to speak, in that case. All right, so Austin, Texas. Does a single owner LLC count as a business entity? Yes, single owner entity can be considered business entity. Usually, again, depending on the type of work and investments that you do, I would care more about the tax selection of that entity, because as I said, you usually get the most out of the 401k perks when you have something like an S or C corporation, or LC tax as an S or C corporation. And those can be with only one single owner as well, so long as you make a proper tax selection. All righty then. Let's see, I think Joel had a W-2 income. We already asked. All right, Karen has an interesting question. Since they hired 87 IRS agent, what are they targeting? Well, Karen, great news for us, horrible news for the IRA. That whole 87,000 million, whatever agents they're looking to hire up that they've announced, I believe, end of last year. They've been hiring actively through this year. Well, the good news is that they can't even amount so far close to 10,000 agents as compared to their 87,000 limit. So they're nowhere near to fulfilling that goal because, well, tax profession is not the most popular, I guess, among the younger generation. So they're going to be targeting someone for sure. The difference is that they're nowhere, luckily, they're nowhere near on track for this amount of agents just yet. So it looks like they are having a hard time pursuing the people to go in the tax and just train qualified specialists. Everyone needs qualified CPAs and tax professionals. Sandeep is asking, for solo 401k, can the husband and wife both contribute $66,000 each? Yes, we did mention that. Again, $66,000 is a limit per person, provided that you have enough income flow, but you can double that with each spouse, because inside of your solo 401k, even though it's set up for both spouses, there'll be a husband and wife's buckets, so to speak, where you can put your contribution, you can put hers, because remember, sometimes, unfortunately, married couples can split. You can take your investment and your retirement with you as part of that split and divorce procedure. So yes, you can double that. If you're collecting Social Security income, can your retirement accounts avoid tax liability? Yes. Well, tax liability generally, the tax deferment here is the feature of a retirement plan, provided that you have income. But the problem with this scenario that you painted, if you're currently collecting supplemental social income as SSI or social insurance, something like that, you might be limited in your ability to generate active income, because depending on the type of program you're in, state or federal sponsored program, sometimes if you have an active income and you need an active income to sponsor the plan, it can have an effect on how much benefit you may qualify for based on a particular factor. If it's a disability related, maybe you don't have that big of an issue, but it can be problematic sometimes, and you might not necessarily, it may interfere with your benefits there. So you have to be careful there. We might need to chat. Cindy is asking, after the age of 59 and a half, can a 401k be transferred to gold or silver without penalty or tax? Yes, but depends on how we're going to do that gold and silver. Usually, if you're looking to hold physical gold, if that's your thing, you're Scrooge McDuck, you like it, feel it and touch it, then normally self-directed IRA is a better vehicle for something like a physical gold possession and silver or platinum, whatever you're investing in. If you're okay investing in bonds that are gold backed and silver backed, but not in the physical, then those are better to be done with the 401k. And as I said, any asset of your retirement plan, whether it's an IRA or 401k, if you hit the age where you now has to take out required minimum distribution, usually at 72, then it is possible to distribute an asset, provided that it's of comparable value to meet that distribution requirement. You can distribute an asset, recognize income on it, and you don't have to liquidate necessarily. You can take the asset out. So if you have gold bullion somewhere sitting there, well, it's a possibility for you to start accessing. And again, there's issue with the physical possession, because with a solo 401k, usually physical ownership, when you get access to those bullions and store them somewhere at home in your mattress, is not permissible. There are some exceptions with certain types of IRAs, but you have to be careful with solo 401k. It will be form of prohibited transaction. You won't be able to do that as easy. All right, let's see. I'm 61 Canadian. We did answer that one live, so we can close that one. Cindy is asking, after each FINIVA, can you transfer to gold? We did that one as well. Can you take multiple 50,000 loans at the same time? Personal loans yourself, private lending? Yes, as I said, if you have an Anderson 401k plan, then we do allow up to 3 loans at the same time, provided that you comply with that overall balance and loan limit requirements. So that is permissible. Joan is asking, sorry, can you explain again how Anderson QRP is different? Are you able to offer this extra services? Well, sure, Joanna. So if you're going to go out and walk into, let's say, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, and some other services that just even online, your banks, your Wells Fargo's, Bank of America's, Chase's offer you some of these types of plans. The problem with those plans is that they created in a very narrow scope where majority of your investment powers as trustee of that account will be substantially limited. In other words, most things that you would want to invest in and should invest in will not be allowed as a risky investment. And there will be specifically restrictive language saying that you cannot buy real estate, you cannot do option level 0 trading and so forth. What we do is that we take approach that we want to put more power in your hands, provided that you sort of follow our guidelines on things you can and cannot do. And what that means is essentially that we're trying to create a plan that gives you the broad powers, allowing you to choose and invest in essentially anything that is legally possible to invest using retirement plans. Because many custodians out there, they look at it just simply as a retirement vehicle for you. Savings accounts of some sort may allow you some limited stock trading, but they will never ratify and allow you a real estate investment. They will not aid you in that structure. With Anderson, it can be a one-stop shop. You can structure businesses, you can structure a plan, you can get a legal consultation, you can get a tax planning consultation, and then you also can file your returns. You can do your loan paperwork. We can assist you in structuring that real estate acquisition deal. So because we give you the broader power, we'll also equip you with the different supporting tools that allow you to achieve things that you wanted to achieve with your plan, where a vast majority of custodians out there that just offer plans to the public will not allow you to do, because they don't want to risk it. They want you to just put the money aside, place it nice and safe, which is sometimes you need to be able to take risks if you want to, have a good growth. Tracy's asking, how easy, hard it is to move real estate assets into an LLC if it was initially purchased by an individual? Okay, so if you're asking this question, Trace, in the context of can I put it in an LLC under the plan, the answer is that it's not possible. If you own a real estate in your personal name today, you could never able to deed that property into your retirement plan and make it part of your retirement plan assets. Unfortunately, that will be impermissible. If you currently acquired plan, let's say in your personal name directly, and now you want to put it in an LLC, so long as it's under the plan already, you can form an LLC and you can do another deed transfer. But normally, if you're asking this question, it's not in the context of the retirement plan. Generally, you need to have an LLC and you need to have a real estate deed document that will change the ownership from your name into the LLC. But one thing that we do at Anderson, if you're trying to do something like that, we're not just going by your wishes. We have to know where your property is located, where you live, because you have states like California, states like New York with their pain in the butt, pardon my French, tax rules and nuances there, where sometimes you don't necessarily want to go with the LLC right away, or it might be better off using certain types of trust because it will save you more money and not going to trigger certain tax implication like you could have with LLC. So it's an easy concept, but there are some, details based on where the property is located, where you live, where you file returns, and whether or not this is a right move to you, because LLC is not an answer to everything necessarily. Jem is asking, can my IRA LLC borrow money to buy real estate? Unfortunately not. Solo 401ks can have, and solo 401k LLCs can have limited loans. When it comes to trying to borrow money into your IRA LLC, you're going to likely hit what's called UDFI, unrelated debt income financing, where essentially a form of a tax penalty where your IRA will hit with penalty and potential disqualification if it uses debt as an ability to acquire and invest into certain assets. So with IRA, you have that limitations. There's no such thing as IRA as a borrower on the loan, not for any sort of a good way. It's normally something that opens up a can of worms for unrelated debt income financing, UDFI.
That's a Sergey, question on that one. What about partnering in real estate deals? So if
absolutely,
if you've got financing and you got your solo to partner, you can do that though, correct?
Yeah, great question. So as an alternative to being able, in limitations to be able to have loans through the IRAs, a good solution to that problem could be partner with someone. Your IRA LLC can partner with you. It can partner with other people, with or without you, by the way. And there's a pretty specific structure how those loans, I'm sorry, that those partnership transactions must be structured. But the good news is that if you're short on cash and you don't have enough money, bring the partners to this deal, call us. We will walk you through the specific steps of how you walk that fine line between a partnership with your plan and a potential prohibited transaction. And that's the work around the situation where, okay, we don't have access to loans. It's not permissible for our IRAs, but good news, we can have partners, including partners ourselves as partners with our IRA on real estate acquisition. So that way we can supplement any shortfall of capital, so to speak, by bringing new investors on this deal and still making it happen. So yes, great point. Thank you very much for that. All right, we got Franklin asking, what about the monies as a 1090? It has a corporation received the payment and then your corporation gives a W-2, can do a solo or Roth. Okay, so frankly, if you receive some, I'm guessing you're asking a 1099, that's probably a typo, like meaning if you're a 1099 contractor, you have a self-employment income, can you swing that solo 401k strategist? And the answer is absolutely yes. The way it would work, you're likely going to need something like, I'm guessing if you're a 1099 contractor, usually you'll go with something like an LLC, taxes and S corporation. You collect that 1099 income, you deposit it, make it an income of your corporation, and then that corporation starts paying you wages and sponsor your retirement plan. 1099 income is a form of a self-employment income, which usually means that if you have that type of income, if you're a contractor, you absolutely can take advantage out of the solo 401ks and certain IRAs, including Roth, solo 401 or Roth 401k, self-directed IRAs, and so forth. So the answer is usually yes. I like to pair that sort of stream of income with the business entity, just so we have a little bit more formalized relation. So you don't act like a freelancer, but you have an actual business that collects your contractor income or freelance work that you do through, and then you can do salary and benefits and contribute to retirement accounts and so forth. Jesslyn is asking, yes, I need help with retirement fund, IRA, rental investment. Jesslyn, looks like you're a perfect candidate for our free session. We'll be happy to chat and see what exactly you have in mind and how can we help. All right, anonymous attendee is asking, if I already have a solo 401k plan and a sponsor, will you still provide other services, or do you need to have an Anderson solo 401k? Well, it depends. We can certainly answer a lot of questions. We can help you with business entity structures if you need something like that. We can also get into legal details. The problem, not necessarily a problem, but it depends on the type of plan you have, because again, there are some providers out there that may limit your ability to invest in certain things. So if you come to Anderson and ask questions and you want to buy something that your current plan limits, my only answer to that will be, listen, we need to move from that plan to our plan so we can give you that powers and that trust agreement, and you can do that transaction that you wanted to do because your current plan does not allow you to. So yeah, we can certainly evaluate your existing plan, answer questions, but depending on what you're looking to do, sometimes we might have a kind of a hit that roadblock if it feels like your plan will not allow you that type of investment. We'll still give you that answer, but if you want to move forward, you're probably going to have to change something about the plan. And here's the good news, by the way, for those of you who already have solo 401ks, you are allowed to change custodian, do a redraft, and kind of move that existing plan over to us. So what, in other words, is basically the same plan, just like it was existed and sponsored originally, which is basically redraft its terms, giving you broader investment powers, and then we'll bring it under our custodian umbrella, so that way you can do all those investment things. In other words, you don't have to ditch your old plan. So long as it's a workable plan that we can salvage, and we can move it under our wing, kind of ditching some of the limitations of your current custodian if you have one. Jesslyn saying that she clicked on the link. Thank you very much, Jesslyn. We're looking forward to seeing you. And Joanne is asking, if I purchase a rental property under QRPLC, does the passive income go back into QRPLC? Yes, that is correct. So you have a couple of options. Ideally, you want that QRPLC to have its own bank account, like a checking account at least. Money normally can go in there, and then from there, it can go into your solo 401k accounts. There is an actually opportunity, depending, again, if you're doing your plan with Anderson, we equip your plan, your solo 401k with necessary amount of checking and savings accounts. Essentially, there's a option where you don't have to have a QRP LLC account where that money can go directly into your plan, even though there's an LLC buffer in between. So you have both options. It's all about you maintaining proper books and records, because you can have a QRP LLC account just as a regular checking account, put money there, and then move it into your plan. Or money from rental income can go directly into your plan, provided that inside of your plan you have all the necessary sub-account buckets for deposit account, which is something we certainly can do for you, because we do create that extra account where all your loan repayments, income, and that kind of stuff can go into it. It's not commingling with your like a Roth 401k bucket, tax deferred compensation, things like that. So yeah, we can do all of this. And with that being said, this is our final question for the night, I think. Joanna said that it has been extremely informative. Thank you very much, Joanna. It's nice to know that I didn't waste a lot of your evening on this election night. Yeah. Hopefully all of you had a chance to get out there and vote. It's our civics duty. Let's take it seriously, especially that, as you can see, political climate have a direct effect on an economic climate, and then our ability to prosper from it or lose money, because certainly I could say as entrepreneurs, as investors, we've been under attack in the past years, where every single legislative session it feels like the government trying to chip away a little bit more from our wealth. And that's voting is one of our way to kind of counter and battle that. So thank you very much for your time today. And Kendall, do we have any closing remarks?
No, I seriously, Sergey, very, very much appreciate your time and expertise tonight. Thank you for sharing. Wow, you're a smart guy, and we really appreciate you sharing that with our people here. Everyone here, really, I strongly encourage you to sign up for a strategy session with Sergey and Anderson Advisors and their team there. They are a good group. They take good care of you. They do a good job, Sergey. You guys really do.
Yeah, we have a lot of, we have over 25 attorneys working currently. We have dozens and dozens of tax specialists. And we're very thankful for this opportunity today, for your time, participation. Thank you to Don Pendleton team for hosting this event and for having me over. As I said, listen, you don't have to commit to anything until you decide on something. If you're just curious to find out a little bit more, if you want to basically see how deep is that rabbit hole of that retirement account and savings and tax saving in the good positive sense of that word or phrase, schedule your free session. You don't have to commit to anything. You are allowed to ask questions and please get your free guidance, free information, and then you can decide what you want to do next. We are here, happy to help, and I'm looking forward to do more of this for you soon.
Yeah, they got nothing to lose. And the thing is, like we mentioned early on in the webinar, the people that do these strategy sessions and actually, move forward and implement these strategies are far better off down the road than if you didn't do anything. No doubt about it. You want to find those tax-free benefits, this is the best way to do it. Sergey, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yep. And then just final word for those of you who are still on the fence, if you're not sure, there's been a mention about a Don Pendleton YouTube channel. You can find a lot of helpful information links. Keep that in mind that Anderson also puts a lot of information on YouTube. So if you just want to start poking around, these are just some of the subjects of YouTube content videos that we have. They are mostly on Mr. Kuhn's YouTube account with Anderson, and then our other partner, Mr. Toby Mathis, has quite a few of those on the tax planning specifically. So if you're just still wondering, if you're looking for answers and you're not sure if you're ready to do a session, check out the YouTube for both Don Pendleton team as well as Anderson's team. And then let's, hopefully get you more comfortable with that when you're ready to make your first step.
Absolutely, guys. Bring it on. We'd be happy to answer your questions and help you. Everybody, thank you so much for being on the call tonight. Sergey, thank you again for your expertise.
Thank you.
We very, very much appreciate it. I look forward to doing this again in the future sometime.
Absolutely. I'm here. Just let me know when. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Everybody have a great night. Appreciate it very much. We'll send a recording out. You should have that within the next 24 hours.